it's good to have you here, and it's interesting because I think the topic today probably is again, it's all perfect. Spirit always guides me as to what the topic's going to be, and sometimes I think, like, really, you want me to talk about that? But then it always turns out that it's like the perfect information that some of you were ready to hear or wanted to hear, and or it was something that you were dealing with. I wanted to talk about, I've talked about this before, but I'm getting in a little more detail in this, but it's releasing negative energy and overcoming what I call negative self-talk, because we don't pay enough attention to the things that we say and we think, not only about ourselves but about others as well. And I've addressed the subject of judgment in the past, but I really wanted to kind of grind down into really overcoming negative energy, because right now we're in the midst of a lot of negative energy around a lot of things, and not just the political arena, but just in the world in general. A lot of people, many of you perhaps, you're going through a lot of transition in your life, and even in my business is going through transitions and shifts and changes, and we are too, but that's also from a spiritual perspective. And my beliefs is that this is part of the journey that we're all going through in the world, moving more to a peaceful place. And I come from the corporate world, and I'm well versed on when corporations have to reorganize. And usually before they reorganize, it's chaos. It's chaos in the company. There's been chaos going on. There's customer issues or employee issues, and people aren't happy and so forth. And all that starts to happen, but that's what happens, is the chaos begins to rise up, and then that pushes and promotes change. And then when the change happens, then things can get better. But chaos always precedes change, whether it's in a company, whether it's in your life, whether it's in a business, or even in your family. Because when there's chaos in your family, it can promote change. But it's also in how you handle it. And what happens is we get caught up a lot in talking and thinking negatively about ourselves. And there are ways, even spiritually. I mean, one of the, there's a list of what we call spiritual laws. I mean, Deepak Chopra wrote a book, I think, on the 9 spiritual laws. And then Dan Millman, who is a spiritual leader and who actually wrote the book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Some of you may know of it, you may not. I'm a lot older than most of you, and that was very popular back in the 70s and 80s. They even made a movie out of it. But it was about a whole spiritual journey that he went through in transitions, and then he ultimately became a spiritual leader. He was actually a Olympic trampolinist, and so he was very focused in his health and in sports. But he had this spiritual journey, and he wrote not only that book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, but he wrote other books after that. He really dug into numerology, which I have studied for years, and I consider him one of my mentors that I learned from in terms of numerology and how it affects our lives and what our patterns are. So, spirituality is what I like to call it. I kind of consider myself a person that wants to contemporize spirituality, that I don't want it to be like the way that most people think it should look, because I tell everyone, in your spiritual lifestyle, it's how you set up your lifestyle. That's your spiritual lifestyle. Most people think, oh, well, I have to be a vegetarian to be spiritual, or I have to meditate every day to be spiritual. And in this day and age, no, you really don't have to do that. You have to find what works for you. But what you really must do is focused on staying in a positive mindset. And if you can do just that and catch yourself when you're losing track of your energy, then that's a great spiritual accomplishment. So I want you to think about how you talk and speak and how you perform in your environments, and ask yourself, where am I bringing in negative self-talk and negative talk out in the world and in my environments? And what happens is we're not even aware sometimes of what we say to ourselves or to others. And I believe that there are ways that we can ground ourselves and begin to catch ourselves and be present. Because if you're more present, which is also, that really is sort of a spiritual principle, is to practice being present. When you're present, you're very clear on what you're saying. You're very clear on how you're speaking. When you lose that presence, when you're not connected to perhaps what I call your energetic source or your higher power, then you lose that presence. And then that kind of causes us to go off in a direction that may not be positive in helping ourselves. So it's really important to think about, how do you talk about things? I mean, we say little simple things and we don't realize how powerful that is. The book, The Four Agreements, one of the chapters is about words are powerful. And words are like, you can't take back what people say about situations. I think there's a story of, like, you can hammer a nail into a piece of wood, but when you pull that nail out, the hole is still there. The hurt is still there, no matter what. And that's what happens with words or things that we say to others, or we say about others. And so I would say one of my practices is that I work hard to be present and not carry words and energy that are negative. Now, I'm human, so I'm not perfect. And I catch myself sometimes. And also, if you catch yourself, if you say, I'm not really speaking of this in order to generate negative energy, but I am making an observation. And it's okay to do that, because sometimes we do have to make observations about situations to determine, is this positive or is this negative? And we don't often think about that, like, really, well, could I assess this? Could I think about, maybe that person I'm working with, I'm saying to myself, oh, it's hard to work with this person, and they're so negative, and so, but what you're doing is you are now judging, but you're carrying on that negative energy. And what you want to do is say, how could I shift this? How could I shift my feeling towards someone? Or how could I shift my language about someone? And because what it does is, to me, it causes the energy to drop off of you. We talk about clearing ourselves when we're around negative people, but we can clear ourselves every hour when we become very focused on how we talk or speak about ourselves. I mean, just a simple situation when you're doing something, you go, oh gosh, I'm so stupid. That's self-talk, Oh God, I shouldn't have done that. What an idiot I am. I mean, that's just common language. People do that all the time. And one of the things I like to say is cancel that, cancel, and, or I'll never make this work. Well, possibly you could. And I know in business, when I shifted my mindset about 7 or 8 years ago, I decided to really practice on saying there are no problems, there's only opportunities. And then if I don't see it as a problem, I see it as an opportunity. Now, the opportunity may not be what I want, but it is an opportunity. And so when you shift your mindset to there are no problems, there's just opportunity, your whole alignment with the universe will change. It will change, because now you'll start to see solutions. And also because you're aligning yourself with the spiritual energy of the world, then the universe starts to deliver or bring some of the solutions to you so that you can work through something. I think two of the hardest behaviors for, at least for me, is to be very focused on always trusting Spirit. You know, even like on Sunday mornings when I'm getting ready, sometimes I flip on the TV and I just listen to different people on TV, and I'm the kind of person that I like to know what others are saying. I like to know what they're preaching, because if they're preaching things that maybe I don't agree with, at least it gives me the option to know how to handle situations when people come to me and say, I need some guidance or I need mentoring because my church says this is evil. My church says I shouldn't be doing this. Well, I kind of need to know, what is being said so that I can have an authentic answer for that and not judge or criticize whatever that religion is or whatever that church is saying. And I do have a lot of people that come forth, even in our business, that say, you know, I really want to understand and learn about crystals, but, you know, my pastor says, oh no, this is evil. You know, this is really evil. And she goes, but I don't feel it, but I'm torn because of this. I'm torn. I've said to a lot of people, and I know that we've had conversations and discussions, just because you want to step more into a modern spiritual form of behavior, it doesn't mean that you have to leave everything that you learned in your church, because there are some good foundations. There are good foundations. It doesn't mean that just because there's some crazy language in the Bible, that the Bible doesn't have good stuff in it. It does have a lot of good stuff. I do believe that there's a lot of parts to the Bible that are good advice, good information, good energy. But I also think there's some crazy things in the Bible, however they were translated, that make no sense to me whatsoever. But there are people that will take that information and turn it into something crazy. And the next thing you know is that that's being preached. So, again, I'm a pretty open mind person. I do have my boundaries. But I also believe that no matter who you are, no matter what religion you believe in or grew up with or where you go, that I may not agree with it, but I respect it. I'll respect that someone, this is your belief, that's okay. I'm fine with that. As long as you don't want to make me out to be wrong because I don't believe like you do. And that's where the line gets drawn. And that's where people feel like they have to put themselves in a box. And then that's where that negative energy starts to grow, because you're being told you should be this way, there should be a certain thing that you should do, and then you're like, but that's not me. Because one thing I know about everybody in this room right now, you have an innate, natural ability to know what feels right for you and what doesn't feel right for you. But we get kind of herded into a group because now, if we're not agreeing with the group, we get kicked out, right? Or people sort of like, oh, you're not thinking like us, you must not be, really serious about this group, so we got to kick you out, because you're not believing like us, even though you may have 80% of the foundation of that group. And that's where, again, to me, that's where a lot of negativity comes from, is from religion. Is because we've all been programmed and put in this box. And again, I'm not saying that religion isn't good, because there is some good foundation to it. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I went to a Baptist college. I had to study religion because I went to school there. But I was studying art at the time because it was a great liberal arts school. However, we were required to do certain things, and I'm very grateful for that part of that education, because I learned a lot. And I learned, things that definitely shaped me. But I also learned when I was in college, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm studying this, and I realize now I don't believe my own religion. Because we studied other religions, and I was like, I don't believe my own religion right now. I got to do something about this. And it was a long journey for me. It was a very long journey because I wanted to explore and figure out a lot of things. So if you think about when you were young, there were a lot of things that you were programmed with by your family, by friends, by teachers, by even in work, all kinds of things as you grew up. And when something doesn't feel right to you, what happens is it's negative energy that's kind of growing within you. And so there are ways to work on this. There are different ways that you can begin to program yourself. See, to me, the only person that can program me is me. I'm the only one that can program me because I'm in control of me. And then we also have to look at, when we get into controlling ourselves, we have to look at what are our boundaries. Because we allow people to come into our boundaries and then somehow we lose control of ourselves because now they're doing things that control us. And we have to be willing to say, okay, what was my boundary? But when we get into starting to feel that negative energy, is you do have to be aware of what your narrative is. What are you saying? Like, this doesn't feel right. Oh, it's what's the narrative? Are you putting yourself down? Or are you lifting yourself up? And you can lift yourself up. And some people say, I just can't do it. I just can't say it. And I'm like, but right now you have a narrative. Because you're saying I can't do it. But you can shift that narrative right now and say, I can do it. I will do it. You can shift that in an instant. Tony Robbins, who's, a well-known personal coach and has led programs that have touched probably millions of people. He says, just like that, you can shift your behavior. You can change your self-talk. You can change your image. So you have to think about, how do I change my narrative around something that is negative to me? It might be a parent. You have a lot of interactions with you're constantly bickering back and forth to your mother or your father, or they're saying you should be doing this or you should be doing that. And you eventually have to change that narrative in that, number one, it's not their life, it's yours. And number two, you're an adult, they no longer control you. But what I do know in many cases, even though from a parent it may feel harsh, they do love you. And to them, that's the way they show that they love you, is saying, oh, you should do this. My parents always said, oh, you should be doing this. And I'm like, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Or this is the kind of job you should have. I don't want to do that. But it was, their way. But what they were saying is, we want you to be taken care of. We want you to be protected. We don't want you, again, they didn't want me to fail. But again, that was negative energy because they weren't even assuming that I could be very successful. And in an odd way, it's like the fact that they pushed that way, that's what made me successful. And so I could turn around and say, well, I really appreciate my family because they were so icky to me that I became a really good person. I pushed forward. I was, and I respect that now. I respect the fact that my mother was very difficult. But I learned how to handle that. And so I can give gratefulness to the fact she came into this world to be this icky person, and it made me a better person. So that's where I'm able to forgive all of that, because there was a lot more to that. A lot of drama, a lot of trauma around some of those situations. But gratefully and thankfully, as a young child, I was just very connected to spirit. And God would say to me, it's going to be okay. Yeah, this may be really bad right now, but it's going to be okay. Hang in there, because it will be okay. And that's where I talk about surrender. That's where I talk about, okay, God, I got to believe you. I got to believe you. And when I was a kid, I would have conversations with God all the time. I didn't realize that's who I was talking to. I grew up in the woods on a river, and I just roamed the woods and talked to the fairies, but I was really talking to God. And I didn't realize that, but I always knew that if I trusted in whatever that power was, and if I trusted 100% good things would happen. And they did, and they do, and they happen to me all the time. Maybe not in the way I want them to sometimes, but they do happen. But I have to surrender, I have to release. The other thing is that I want you to challenge negative thoughts. I want you to challenge negative thoughts that you have. Because I want you to, you think like, okay, I'll never be able to accomplish this. Or I just won't be able to start a business. I just won't be able to do it. I can't leave my current job. I got to put food on the table. I've got to do these things. I just can't leave my business. You're constantly, and not that you're saying that, Nancy, because I know.
You made me start to wonder.
No, because Nancy's probably one of the most enthusiastic people I've been around. And the point is, though, you don't want to talk yourself out of something.
Yeah.
And so, many of you, there's probably some of you in this year, whenever you may lose your job, and you may start to ask yourself, do I really want to go back into that kind of work? Do I really want to do that, or do I want to do something that I feel passionate about? Because I'm going to tell you, in the next 2 years, a lot of people will lose their jobs. And again, this is all going to be somewhat normal. But a lot of people will make the decision, I'm not going back into the corporate world, or I'm not going back into the position that I was in. I want to help others. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see more coaches, more practitioners, more service-oriented, even trade and technical. You're going to see more of that evolving in the world. And anyone in this room could step into a role like that and be in control of your own business or your own service that you want to deliver to other people. Because number one, you all have a story. Mm-hmm. And there are people that have stories like you that can't figure out how to move forward, but you can help them. So, I want you to recognize that this is part of the spiritual revolution. It is part of people starting to really tap into, I am spiritual. There is something to this. There's definitely something to this. I listened to a presentation the other day, and the person was really knocking big time preventative health. That it was a bunch of woo-woo stuff and all this stuff about supplements and vitamins and all these things. They were really knocking that. And I'm just sitting there going, oh my goodness, there's an entire, a huge gathering of people, or a huge industry of people that practice preventative health. And guess what? They're healthy. They're actually healthy. And I'm like, how can you deny that? How can you say that doesn't work? But again, that was their belief. And I was thinking to myself, is that's just an example of that person doesn't believe that. And who knows, they may or may not be healthy, I don't know. But the point is that they're spreading, in my opinion, negative energy. Because again, if you don't believe in it, that's one thing. But you could say, well, I don't believe in it, but obviously there's people that engage in really taking care of themselves. They take supplements and they eat healthy based on what they think is healthy. Because what's healthy for me may not be healthy for you. Because all of our bodies are different. And right now, every one of you is on a path, a journey. You have a kind of a timeline journey, and wherever you are on that path is perfect. Even if it's in a negative place, that your feeling is negative, things aren't going well for you, you're feeling it, it's perfect. However, you have the ability to shift that, to say, yeah, this isn't going well, it's not going the way I wanted it to, but let me see what I can turn this into. There are many women and men who've gone to prison, did something and went to prison, and they realized they were supposed to be there. They turned it into something positive. They increased their education. They were able maybe to learn more, to educate themselves. They perhaps educated others. They worked with others. They realized that they had this opportunity that, yeah, it's not a great thing. I'm locked up, but what could I do here? And there are more people in prisons than you realize that really are good people, really are. They change. And, you know, but what does society do? It only focuses on the negative parts of it. So the point is, it doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. I mean, think of the young girl. I remember this story. Talk about negativity. You may remember it. She was from Georgia. The young girl that was ziplining and fell into the lake, and it cut her leg, and she got that, whatever that, she has the bacteria, yeah, where it was eating, and they had to amputate her arms and her legs. And she told them, go for it. And she, I think she was like a counselor, or she did some kind of coaching, and she's still doing that today. She basically said, this isn't going to stop me. Now, wow, that's I'm telling you, again, that young lady had a spirit. She knew something, and she just continued forward. And I kind of kept up with her several years after that happened, and she was doing, I think she was working with people in occupational therapy, because she herself had gone through that, but she had been trained previously in some kind of coaching or counseling or camp counselor or something. But again, how positive that she became, the self-talk. She didn't let the self-talk change her. I remember years ago, my cousin was living here, and he dove into a little stream or creek that was very shallow. He broke his neck. And the friend with him floated him up to the edge and just had to leave him there because they were out in the middle of nowhere. And he ended up at Shepherd. And I got a call because the rest of the family, his family, lived in Mississippi. And I got a call that, I was the only one here, that he was in the hospital, he was at Shepherd, he'd broken his neck, and they didn't know if he was going to be paralyzed, but that could I go and stay with him until his family got to him. They were able to travel here. The minute I walked in his room, I mean, I literally walked in the room. His name was Michael, and he had that cage around his head where they had the screws in his head, and he was in bed, and he goes, I'm going to walk again. Mm-hmm. He said that to me, and I felt it. Mm-hmm. I felt it, and I looked at him and I said, you're right, Michael. You are going to walk again. Yeah. I believe that 100%. And he did. He did. He was there for a long time. He has a slight limp when he walks, but he was determined. And the interesting thing was there was a curtain, because there were two people in the room, and there was another young man, just out of high school, I believe, had a scholarship, football scholarship, and had broken his neck in one of the last football games in high school. And I, we kind of got to know each other, but I remember when we kind of pushed the curtain back, we could talk, and I could look at him. There was nothing in his eyes. Mm-hmm. He had lost hope. And so I was like, wow, the difference in the two. And they had the same kind of injury, both of them, the same injury. So, when you think about seeing or hearing or being in a negative situation, the goal is to shift your language, shift your thoughts, ask yourself, how could I change this? How could I right now? How could I change my energy right now? And sometimes maybe shifting that is walking away from someone, saying, I just don't think I want to talk about this anymore, and turn and walk away. That's setting a boundary. Mm-hmm. Definitely setting a boundary. What are some of the things we say? I have no choice. I don't have a choice. Well, what's the opposite? I get to choose how I work, how I respond, how I be, who I'm with. We all have lots of opportunities, and we always think of it as negative. How many of you have been in situations in work where you're getting called to your manager's office? And the minute that happens, or the minute you're like, oh, it's going to be something negative. That's where most people go. They don't go to the positive side. They go to the negative side. And I remember someone when I was working in a corporation, she had been called to the CEO's office, and she came to my office and said, I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. I don't know. Do you think I'm going to get fired? And I was like, why would you think that? Why would you think that? You've just been called to the CEO's office. It could be anything. And she's like, I don't know. I think maybe I've done something wrong and I'm going to get fired. And I was like, well, you'll know when you get there. She goes to the office, and about 45 minutes later, she comes to my office, she goes, I got a promotion. And I'm like, see? You know, where did your mind go? And so you have to think positively because you put an energy out. And when you do, guess what? People respond positively. They will respond positively to you. I've actually practiced that. There's a book called Finding Your North Star by Martha Beck, and she has an exercise. Well, there's two things that she says. The first thing, it just blew my mind. She said that meth addicts create about $90,000 a year, $90,000 to $100,000. Create. Now, when I say create, there's a lot of ways they get that money, okay? But they're determined because they know what they need to support their habit. So they're very determined, okay? And she said, you know, why is it that a person in that situation is able to do that, but then you have a person over here that just lost their job in the corporate world, and they're like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make money? I don't know. You know, but the point is that it's the ingenuity, the creativity, and or the drive, because obviously there's an addiction and that's driving the person. But the reality is that there's a capability there. Actually, they're even though they're in a negative place, they're thinking positively because they know what they have to do. And I'm not putting down addicts. My own son was a meth addict, and so I learned a lot about that because of that. And actually, that opened my mind to a lot of things. It opened my heart to a lot of things. So the reality is that you're capable. Anybody's capable, no matter who you are or what situation that you're in. And then the other part to this is that what Martha Beck, she said, I want you to do this experiment. So I had to do it. She said, go into a place like a coffee shop or somewhere where you're getting some kind of service, mainly around food. And she said, but go in the first day, just don't really fix yourself up, just put on your old clothes, and just walk in like this. Just really walk in and just kind of be depressed and moody and go to the counter and order and just go through that behavior and watch how you're treated. Watch how people look at you. Watch how you're treated. And pay attention to everything. And then a day or two later, go back in, fix yourself up, be happy. And she also said when you go in, when you're going in like, sort of put your shoulders down, but tell yourself, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. Say that to yourself all the way to the counter. And then the next day, clean up, look your best, go in, be happy, put your shoulders back, walk in, look at people, say hello, go to the counter, order, make a comment on the person, just be happy and look at how you're treated. Mm-hmm. It works. It absolutely works. So when you're in a negative place, you're going to get negativity when you're carrying that negative energy. The other thing is things never work out. People say that, this never works out for me. But then the opposite is things are unfolding in divine timing. Divine timing. This will all unfold when it is to unfold. That is, you must trust. You must trust. And another comment, and this is a biggie. They did it. They made me feel this way. It's their fault. It's not my fault. It's their fault. How often do you feel that? And then you have to come back and say, but wait a minute, I'm responsible. I take responsibility. That's one of the biggest problems, I think, in society, is that so many people don't want to take responsibility for themselves, for anything that happens. It's, it was their fault. They did this to me. Yeah, I made a bad choice, but they did this to me. So life is really, your whole life is formed by the choices that you make. And it's formed by the choices of how you speak about yourself, the choices of how you speak about others, and the choices in your own behavior. So maybe when you leave today, you might sit down and whether you journal or just think about it or have a conversation with a friend. What are some phrases that I can incorporate into my life to be more positive, and practice that every day, and then maybe make that an anchor to myself that when something comes up that feels negative, I could then go, let me implement this phrase. For me, it's like cancel that. I got to cancel that. What am I thinking? Because if I'm not present, then I don't have the presence to cancel what I just said. And the more that I pay attention to canceling a thought or a conversation, I get more positive. The negative doesn't come up. The negative doesn't happen. The other thing is, you can always reframe a story, especially from a victim position. You can always reframe a story in that once you decide that you are responsible, then you have to look at what was your role in that. And was your role in that, did that cause negativity? If you're arguing with someone and you're continuing to argue with them, or you both have a very strong opinion and you're like, no, you're wrong, what was your role in that? Your role is that you were continuing to carry on the negative conversation, the negative thoughts. To me, I would love it if, and I think our world will go here, but I would love it eventually when people can have conversations with completely different opinions and respect that. And say, I don't agree with you, that's not how I feel, but I can respect that you feel that way. And there's no anger here, and actually I kind of like you. There's been situations, I know it happened for me, and you may have had these situations where maybe you did work with somebody or in an environment, but at first you didn't like them. Like, oh, I don't like that person, I just can't be around them. And then, maybe there's even some barter, conversation or debating going back and forth. And then one day you realize, I kind of like that person. And, I did that one time to someone that I just had trouble working with. And honestly, they were just kind of creepy. and that's what I was believing about them, okay? I was believing that. And finally, one day, because this person, he was an accountant in the company that I worked in the department that I was in, we each had our own kind of accountants. And he was just kind of creepy, he was quiet, he was sort of a typical, again, I'm judging him, but he was very quiet, but just wouldn't have a lot of conversation. But he was just abrupt, and he just wouldn't have a conversation with you. It's like, okay, here's the report. Yeah, well, could you explain it to me? It's right there on paper, And I was just like, okay, just explain it to me. And so one day I went in there and we were having this little back and forth. And finally I looked at him and I said, you are a real pain, but I think I like you. And he sort of brightened up and he goes, what? And I said, no, I kind of like you. And I learned later that most everybody that had to deal with him didn't like him, considered him difficult. But what I learned, his wife had cancer. And he went home every day dealing with that. And he was also a very personal person. But when I told him I liked him, he kind of went, wow, I could hear his words. He didn't say it, but it was he was like, wow, nobody's ever said that to me. But I realized I gave him a little positive feedback. And that shifted our relationship. He was a little more willing to explain, not always, but he was a little more willing to help me understand some of those numbers. The other thing is create an empowering mantra or just something that you say to yourself. It's important, maybe every morning, just one thing. Get up in the morning and say that to yourself. Something positive, like, I'm going to have a great day today. And you will have a great day. You will. Part of my spiritual practice is I draw 2 tarot cards every morning. and I ask a question around that, and then I gain insight for the day. Like, what is the day gonna bring me? And then I look for it. You know, and like sometimes I get a card that says, you know, obstacles. And I'm like, okay, I might have some obstacles today, but I'm aware of it. I'll be able to handle it, and maybe it's a good obstacle. So I start my day with that, and then I have other things that I like to do, but sometimes I don't always do the same routine every morning, because there are some mornings I like to be at work really early to catch up on things, and then some days I get here much later. And so I don't always have that same routine. So, but it's great for you to create something that you say to yourself, like, I am a powerful person. You know, I am a powerful person. In fact, yesterday we did a little exercise in our group. Do you remember
Yes.
what you had to say?
Yes, you want me to do
Will
it?
you share it with us?
Okay. She's making me practice this mantra. Okay, I am Nancy York, and I am the owner of Step Into Your Creative, Vibrant Life. I am passionate, I am confident, and I am successful every single day. I have unlimited success.
That was perfect. Just give her a hand. That was perfect, Nancy. And she's going to say that to herself every day. And I guarantee you she will have a great business and it'll grow, because she believes in herself. And she carries that energy. You know, can you imagine somebody going, I'm successful? It doesn't work. It's you have to embody the entire thought. So if you have a mantra, embody it in the morning. You know, and some people have, I have a lot of energy, okay? I can go. I mean, I can do 12 and 14-hour days, and I'm 74 years old. And I tell people, I can run circles around you. And the thing is, but that is because I have really positive energy. I love being alive. I love doing the things I do. I'm embodying the energy of youthfulness. That's definitely what I'm doing, because I love what I'm doing. And if I start feeling negative or feeling, you know, fearful about something, then I'm like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I kind of give myself a pep talk. And I do exactly like what I showed Nancy and the group to do, is that you've got to energize yourself. You've got to tell yourself, I can do it. I'm going to get over this situation, or I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to be negative about myself, much less I'm not going to be negative about anybody else. I'm just going to work on me right now. And that's what you want to do, is when you get into that funk of thinking nothing's working, you know, where am I going to go, where am I going to live, what job am I going to have, what situation can I create that's better than now, is you've got to embody positive energy, positive thoughts, positive speak, and positive feelings. And whatever you have to do to get yourself in that state of being is figure it out. Figure out how you do that. How can you help yourself energize more positive energy within you, within your spirit? And then, you know, the bigger piece is to trust. If you trust in a greater power, then trust in that greater power. Because I do believe that Spirit knows when we're working hard. Mm-hmm. Spirit knows. I mean, really, all your guardian angels are right here, right now, and they're all nodding their heads and saying, yes, we're right here with you. We're right here to guide you. We're right here to take care of you, to be your guardian angels, to help you. And then the last part around this, and I'm going to give you this copy so that you can practice this when you get back, is I'll go back to the stop repeating the victim story. You know, you may acknowledge it, but stop repeating it. You know, we do have to acknowledge things in our lives in order to work on them. You know, you can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge it. You can't fix a situation if you don't acknowledge it. But what you want to do is reframe it and stop repeating it. Reframe it into something positive. Just like I did with my family. Is that, okay, yeah, it was not a good situation with me growing up, but I realized, oh wow, I can appreciate that, I can reframe it, because it made me the person I am today. Because I realized that I wanted to really go out in the world and spread as much love as I could, and help others and make a difference. And that, I owe that to my family, being the way they were, to push me to not be like them. And it made a difference, it's made a difference. And then the last piece is surround yourself, and this is the big part, so you're all in here. Surround yourself with positive people. Surround yourself. If you don't have it at home, if you don't have it at work, then go find places where people are positive or they're working on themselves to be positive. And when you do that, you're sharing your energy with each other. This is why I love groups. Like I said, I just want to fill this whole room up, because I know I can stand here and watch, his energy's arcing over to this energy, and that energy's arcing over to that energy. You're all supporting each other very silently and very subtly, but you're getting good energy while you're in this room. And so find places where it's good energy and people aren't, being resistant or putting you in a box or telling you what you have to do or who you have to be, or that you're not thinking the right way. On demand, and I just started it, but there's another podcast that I absolutely love that I want to share with you, and it's called Buddha at the Gas Pump. And it's a man, it's wonderful. He has all these amazing interviews with spiritual leaders, and it is a fabulous podcast. He's been doing it now for about, I think about 7 or 8, maybe 10 years. And I think you will enjoy. He's got it all categorized by the different subject matters. Another place to go for very positive information is Lilu. It's Lilou, Lilu Mace, M-A-C-E. She's French, French-American. Lilu has a YouTube TV station, but she has something like 5,000 interviews of spiritual leaders all over the world. And you can go in and listen to those as well. It's educational, it's informative, and it's uplifting. And that's the goal of my podcast, is ultimately to be able to put out uplifting information and also have interviews of individuals that bring uplifting information onto the internet. So if you're going to stay on the internet, go find positive places and balance that with all the negativity that's out there. I stay on the internet only because, again, I need to know what people are saying so I can understand how to manage that. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's what's all about, how to get yourself out of a negative thought, negative position, negative feeling, negative people, and go out and practice that. And when you do, you will start to change your life. And if you're in a funk, and then come here on Sunday, and we'll energize you and get you feeling better. And yes, you have a question?
I wanted to share something that I encourage my clients to do, to pass on, is just make a sign and write, "I get to choose," and put it on your bathroom mirror, because you're going to see yourself in the bathroom mirror every day when you just brush your teeth. Mm-hmm. You can also, I guess, put your mantra too, but I get to choose. That's something I really stress a lot.
That's great. And like I said earlier, your life is all the choices that you've made. That's what your life is every choice. Yes?
So it's crazy how you talked about all of this, because it's like, oh my God, it's like exactly where I'm at, right? Like, I'm blown away. Like, on Thursday, I went to see my therapist, right? And you're talking about blaming others, stuff like that, and the victim mentality. So she diagnosed me with PTSD with dissociative features, right? Mm-hmm. It's about the experience and the process, right? Mm-hmm. And then I talked to my other friend who's like, the most spiritual words in the world to me, or period, are "I love you" and "I don't know." So I was thinking, like, maybe I don't know how I'm going to surrender. Mm-hmm. I just have to experience it because it's a natural and it's a process. Mm-hmm. But I still find myself in the blame game. And I want to lash out, but then I was at my friend's house last night, And my parents were interacting with me in a very manner that, you know, I would normally explode over, right? And I was just laughing, right? I was just like laughing at them. I was just like, you gotta be kidding me, right? And it's just like crazy how this whole week, like, I find it funny now because I actually hear the fear in their voice and how like scared little people, right? So it's funny how like going through everything, I'm able to see like you said, the love that they have for me.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, I
That's
can
great.
see the love
Yeah.
that they have for me.
Yeah.
But the way they go about it and do it, it's very traumatizing, you
Yes.
know? But it's crazy because it's just like,
But you turn it, that's what I'm saying, you turn it into, oh wow, I know they're being kind of crazy and doing weird things and maybe even being mean and maybe even being physically abusive or verbally abusive. But in those situations, you want to just take yourself out of those situations.
Yeah.
But when they're being verbally abusive and things like that, or pushing forward or telling you what you should do
Yeah.
and so forth, you have to look at that and go, oh wow, you know what? They really love me because they want me to do well. They want me to be protected. But the other thing I want to say, and this is for everyone, is this has been going on for a long time. You have the opportunity to be on this journey and turn this around, and it may not happen overnight, but it will happen. And so you have to give yourself time to experience these situations and then change your behavior. Because as long as you're performing in the same behavior, every time you have that conversation, it's going to always be the same old, same old.
Yeah.
So you have to switch how you react. Because when you do, they will react differently.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, again, this is practice. This is what I'm talking about, is I get up every morning, the one consistent action I take every morning is draw the 2 cards. I'd like to do other things, but sometimes I just have a lot on my plate. But the point is, I make sure I do one thing every morning, and I think very positively when I see the cards, and I think about today's going to be a great day. And that's what I say each time. And so you just have to be continuous with that, and continuous, because when I wake up, I don't even really have to say it out loud once I get up. It rings in my head. Today's going to be great. My body's already programmed with that. I'm programmed to feel that. I don't even necessarily have to say it. Sometimes, but I find I'm more energized when I say it. But you will program yourself. And the other thing, and I'll just say this, is we get diagnosed with a lot of things, a lot of us. But also, too, as long as you hold on to that, you may not be able to let it go. In other words, you label yourself with something. But what you want to do is get rid of that label.
and that's what my friends
Yes,
do.
you want to get rid of that label. You don't want to, oh, I have this, so I can't do this. Well, yeah, maybe right now that's true. Maybe that's very true because of things that you've done. But in the long run, let's unlabel ourselves. Let's put on the label we want.
Yes.
You know, what's the label you want to wear?
And that's what my
Yeah.
sponsor constantly tells me, like, he's
Yes.
because he's gone through similar things
Yeah.
in my life, right?
Yeah.
But he's so, it's funny because through him, I've gone into the spiritual world because he's taught me everything spiritually, right?
Yeah.
He's 79 and he practiced like metaphysics Christianity, you know?
Mhm.
Like when I say I'm going to hell, he's like, that's a place, and in the Metaphysical Bible, it's like a valley in Israel. He's like, it's just a valley, you're not going to hell, you know?
Unfortunately, I think we're already in hell. This is hell. The world. We were sent here. We're already there. But the point is that you're right. You want to unlabel. You want to think about that. Think about what label would you want on yourself. What would you want it to look like? Give it a logo. Some people want to drive a car, have the Mercedes label on it, and they like that label, and that's a good label. What label would you give yourself? What kind of label will you start to give yourself and transform what someone else is telling you that, you have this, like somebody says, oh gosh, your body, you're going to have arthritis. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And if I do, I'm going to get rid of it. Sorry. I don't have it yet. But the point is don't believe everything that you hear. And don't take it in and believe everything that you Because again, we were given a mind to think, and we were given a spirit to embody and to use. And you can use it every single day, and don't be afraid. In fact, one person said in our class that she's really ready to step out and teach a lot of spiritual things and practices and so forth, but she's resistant or afraid of the judgment that she's going to get because people aren't into spirituality. And I'm kind of like, where are you? Because there's a lot of people into spirituality, and who cares if anybody rejects you? Right, it's like, who cares? I don't care. You know, I tell people I believe in stones and crystals, and there are people who say, I don't believe in that. I don't care. You know, you're not, quote, here, you're not my customer, and that's okay. Because there's plenty of people in this world that believe in all kinds of metaphysical tools. Some they work with, some they don't. You know, it depends upon what works for you. So, again, think about where can you erase negativity that impacts you, that stays with you, that sticks to you, and you want to get rid of it. You're going to encounter negative situations, no matter what, but that's just a form of training. That's just a way to learn how to move out of that and put yourself in a different position. And, you know, but you don't want it to stick to you. You don't want it to be part of who you are. You don't want to talk it. You don't want to think it or feel it. You want to move out of that. And then ask yourself, where can I embody more positive spiritual connection to my source? Because when you're connected to your source, you have a totally different feeling and energy when you're connected. So that's it for today. I am thrilled that you are all here. I hope you'll come back.